Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the PrepMD webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. And our intention today is to share with you two things. First of all, we'd like to discuss the career of a medical device clinical specialist and give you some information regarding the nature of the career. And then, of course, how the PrepMD program might be a tool for you to achieve that career goal. So let me start by once again welcoming everybody to this webinar, and to begin by discussing the career path itself. So we term the medical device specialist career as a hidden career path. Not a lot of folks know that this kind of career even exists. So what is a medical device specialist? So these are individuals who are hired either by medical device companies or they're hired by healthcare systems. And their express purpose is to support the use of medical devices in a clinical and technical fashion. So that support can take a variety of forms, and medical devices is a very broad category. But what we want to address today is specifically the support of cardiac medical devices, which in and of itself is also a broad category, but more narrowly to cardiac devices that are applied to patients to resolve cardiac arrhythmias, such as tachycardia, bradycardia, atrial fibrillation, ventricular tachycardia, ventricular fibrillation. So the support of these devices is a very unique kind of medical device support. And these careers are unique in that context. So what do these individuals do? So they will actually be invited into the procedure room where a cardiac medical device is being implanted or used in a patient. And in that setting, they will operate testing equipment that tests the medical device to ensure that it's going to function properly with regard to the patient. Let me expand on that just a little bit in the setting of cardiac medical devices that are cardiac pacemakers and implantable cardiac defibrillators. So the medical device specialist will be invited into the procedure room where these devices are being implanted in patients. And once the physician has the wire or the electrode properly positioned in the heart, so the physician is looking at a fluoroscopic image of the heart, and he or she is making an assessment as to whether or not that wire, that electrode, is anatomically well positioned in the heart. So once the physician makes that assessment that it looks like it's in a good anatomic position, the medical device specialist will then apply or test that wire. So this is an example of a wire, an electrode that's being inserted into the patient's heart. So this will show up on the fluoroscopy, and I'm just going to use my own anatomy here. The wire will look something like this as it's located in the heart. I think you can see that. And so once the physician identifies that this wire is properly positioned, he will or she will take this end of the wire and clip on something that looks like jumper cables to this end of the wire, and take the other end of those jumper cables and pass them out of the sterile field to the medical device specialist. The medical device specialist, in turn, will clip that end of the jumper cable to a piece of analyzing equipment. We call it a pacing systems analyzer. And a series of very interesting things will now ensue. So the specialist will test this wire to ensure that it's properly, not only anatomically positioned, but properly positioned from an electrical standpoint. So there are a variety of tests that will be performed on this wire. One test is called a pacing threshold, where the analyst will assess the minimum amount of electrical energy that is required to stimulate the heart. So a pacemaker, this is a cardiac pacemaker we're looking at here. So a pacemaker has a battery in it, and that battery has a limited amount of capacity. But anyone who receives a cardiac pacemaker or an implantable defibrillator is probably going to be maintained for the life of that device on drugs. The disease state, if you will, of the patient is going to change over time. And so at the point where this device is being implanted in the patient, we want to make sure that this wire can conduct energy at its lowest possible level to stimulate the heart. This wire has to be tested. So the cardiac device specialist is then controlling the heart rate of the patient to ensure that the energies that are being transported down this wire are at the lowest possible level, so that so that this wire will be able to overcome any increases in impedance or any changes in the pharmacokinetics of the patient, such that the wire, or that the device rather, would not function properly as it's transmitting energy down the course of this wire. So these individuals are making this one test, this pacing threshold test. So once that those metrics are sound, and the specialist has informed the physician that the settings are in range, the next test that the specialist will perform on this wire is a sensing threshold. So this wire not only acts to conduct electrical energy into the heart, but it also acts as an antenna to sense the intraoperative or the intracardiac rather signals coming out of the heart. So think of this as a rabbit ear. Remember, I don't know if you remember, but we used to have rabbit ears that we used to put on television. We used to move them around to get the right kind of signal. So this wire also has to be located properly in order to get the signals from the heart, because we want this device to absolutely work when it should need to work, but we don't want it working when it doesn't have to work. And this wire is responsible for ensuring, as an antenna, that it's in the right position to sense the intraoperative signal, or intracardiac signals rather, coming from the heart. So the specialist is using that analyzing equipment to test this wire as well. And if in either of these, and those two tests, I might add, are not necessarily configured so that one test, if you perform one test, the other test is naturally going to be correct. So each of these tests have to be performed on the wire, and you might get a good pacing threshold, but you might not get a good sensing threshold based upon the position of the wire. Regardless, the medical device specialist is telling the physician, is this wire appropriate for pacing? Is this wire appropriately positioned for sensing? If it is, in both instances, the procedure goes on. If it's not, the physician is going to relocate this wire based upon the information that the medical device specialist gives, to ensure that it is in a good position. So, and there could be as many as 3 wires in a particular implant. So each of those wires has to be tested by the medical device specialist. So this is a very important role that the medical device specialist plays in the actual delivery of a healthcare episode as associated with the implantation of a cardiac pacemaker or an implantable defibrillator. So anybody who receives one of these devices requires regular monitoring and checkup of the device. These devices can last, depending on the amount that they're being used, they can last 8, 9, even 10 years in a patient. So we want to make sure that this device is functioning on a regular basis. Some of these devices can be monitored remotely. So this device has the capability of communicating with a Bluetooth transmitter that in turn will draw data out of this device. So let's just say this Bluetooth transmitter is sitting on a patient's nightstand at night, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, the transmitter taps on this device and says, give me your information. This device will then communicate with the Bluetooth transmitter, its data, and then that data will be transported up into a web portal. And then overnight, the physician practice can download that information and view the data regarding that patient. So these devices can be monitored remotely. However, at least once and probably twice a year, patients will actually go into a physician's office, a hospital, a clinic to have their device checked, physically checked. And in that setting, these medical device specialists also play a very important role. They'll operate a very large laptop-like device that we call a programmer. I don't want to have one here to show you, but consider that this looks like a laptop, and it has a wand attached to it. And that wand can actually be placed over the area where the device is implanted. And once that wand is placed over that area, the medical device specialist will push a button, turn on the programmer, and start to establish a bidirectional telemetry link with the implanted device. Once that link is established, the specialist can then extract diagnostic information from the device. So it will inform her as to all of the operating parameters of this device. What is this device set to? She will be able to see a real-time electrocardiogram scrolling across the programmer screen. She'll also be able to see stored electrocardiographic information from several months back. And because these specialists not only are interpreting this data, but because they understand symptoms associated with cardiac arrhythmic disease, she's asking the patient how they feel. So as oftentimes happens with patients, they may report, oh, I feel fine, I don't have any problems. I would say 6 times out of 10, that's probably the case. And the specialist will be looking at all the data that this device has in it, and will probably say, okay, this device looks like it's properly functioning. But there are times when patients seem to want to share that they're not feeling as well. For example, upon questioning a patient, the patient may report that they're a little dizzy, lightheaded, going up and down the stairs. So the specialist will look at all this data that she has in front of her, will hear the patient's report on their symptoms, and she may make some assessments as to whether or not the device is properly programmed. And she may make some recommendations for changes. So she'll take those recommendations to the physician, and let's just say, doctor, Mrs. Smith is complaining that she's lightheaded and experiencing some dizziness going up and down the stairs. I think if we lower the rate, increase the sensitivity, take this particular algorithm out of the device and instead put this other algorithm in, I think we might remediate some of these symptoms. And 9.5 times out of 10, the physician is going to turn to the specialist and say, okay, I agree, go ahead and make those changes. So the specialist will go back to the programmer, key in those new values, push a button, and reset the device accordingly. So these behaviors of either being in the procedure room where the devices are being implanted, or being in the post-operative monitoring and follow-up of these devices are functionally what these individuals do on a day-to-day basis. They are either, once again, employed by the medical device manufacturers that manufacture this device, or they're employed by healthcare systems working right alongside of the docs and the nurses who are providing therapies to these therapies to patients. In an industry setting, these individuals are doing a lot more in terms of ensuring that product is available throughout all of the hospitals to which they're assigned. They're meeting regularly with their team members to ensure that the types of coverage that I've described to you is being enabled on a day-to-day basis. They're driving from account to account, from hospital to hospital to perform their services. In the clinical setting, of course, they're in one hospital, but they're servicing multiple manufacturers, not just one manufacturer, multiple manufacturers' devices. So it's a very interesting blend of skill sets in either the clinical setting, hospital setting, or the industry setting. But regardless, these specialists are extremely important to the conduct of ensuring that these particular types of medical devices are being properly applied to patients. So the career path itself is, as you can imagine, very rewarding, very satisfying career. Over a period of time, these specialists may actually develop relationships with patients who receive these devices, with their families, and they are viewed and looked at and respected for their knowledge and expertise. They are the medical device specialists. So just a bit of background on how this career path emerged. So it goes really back to the early days of cardiac pacing 60 years ago. The device companies at that time were just introducing these technologies into the medical environment. And physicians, of course, knew that clinically a patient might need a cardiac pacemaker or an implantable device of this nature. And so they, in turn, would call the manufacturer and say, look, I'm going to put a pacemaker in a patient tomorrow, but I really don't understand, what I should be doing in terms of how the technology should be deployed and so forth. Can you, excuse me, can you send somebody to help support? And so the manufacturers would actually do that. They would send an engineer to support the procedure. And from 60 years ago to today, this is still a consistent behavior. And it's become to the point where physicians and nurses who are applying these therapies to patients are really very reliant on these medical device experts, because the devices have proliferated, the technologies have become far more complex. A particular physician or hospital uses multiple manufacturers, and each one of those manufacturers has unique algorithms and capabilities that need to be fine-tuned to patients. And so the physicians and the nurses who support these patients rely heavily on these medical device experts for their expertise and understanding how the device interfaces with the patient, and getting guidance from them essentially as to what parameters are the correct parameters to be deployed for a particular manufacturer's device. So highly respected positions. I can tell you that there are not a lot of these positions in industry. Our judgment at this juncture is that in the United States alone, across the 4 manufacturers of cardiac pacemakers and implantable defibrillators, there are probably about 4,500 people that do this work on behalf of manufacturers. So there are 4 main manufacturers of cardiac pacemakers and implantable defibrillators. Medtronic is the largest. Boston Scientific and Abbott, formerly St. Jude Medical, are next, and then Biotronic is the 4th leader, 4th manufacturer in the United States. So those 4 companies collectively employ roughly about 4,500 people to do this work. On the clinical side, that number is probably trebled. There are at least 3 times that number of people working in hospitals, doctors' offices, clinics, who are dedicated to support the use of these devices. Still, when you combine both the industry as well as the clinic physicians, these this is a rare breed of healthcare professional, and so these jobs are highly specialized. They require highly specialized skills and abilities, and they're absolutely highly sought after once someone understands that these jobs actually exist. And that's why, I guess at the end of the day, that's why we call them hidden jobs. So the career path of a medical device specialist is unique. It starts as a clinical career path, performing the job that I just described to you. But there are many other avenues that can evolve from this clinical role. Certainly, there are individuals who choose to stay in a clinical role. They want to do this kind of work and remain in that clinical capacity for the rest of their professional lives. But they can actually migrate to other roles inside of a clinical specialist position. They can become a senior clinical specialist. They can become a trainer. They can actually become a manager of other clinical specialists. So that kind of career path exists for someone who wants to maintain a clinical specialist role. There are oftentimes opportunities for clinical specialists to move into sales roles or even marketing roles. Generally speaking, career path movement takes place after about a 2 to 3 year time frame. So if you consider the amount of expertise that it takes to develop over a period of time, the 2 to 3 year time frame is just about the right time for an individual who is a clinical specialist to make a decision about which route they want to take. They can stay in clinical, or they can go into sales and marketing. And sometimes, based on your background, there are even clinical specialists who move into product development roles. So there are a broad range of capabilities and pathways for these individuals. And then also, roughly at about the 2 year point of a clinical specialist entry into this career, there's another option open to them. There is a certification that is offered by a professional society called the Heart Rhythm Society. And that society offers a test that can be taken once yearly. And upon the ability of a test applicant, a tester, to pass that test, that individual can gain a certification known as a Certified Cardiac Device Specialist, a CCDS. It is a certification that is validated by a testing group known as the International Board of Heart Rhythm Examiners, or the IBHRE. And once the specialist passes that test and gets that CCDS designation, that designation is recognized internationally. But it is the only certification for this position, and in and of itself is well sought after. So that test probably should be taken at about the 2 or 3 year mark of a clinical specialist career, because so much of that test is experiential in nature. And again, upon successful passing of that test, it enhances the career capabilities of the medical device clinical specialist, whether they want to stay in industry or move to other types of roles. So I just want to take a few moments to discuss the PrepMD program and it as a possible pathway to one of these careers. So myself and my partner, Matt O'Neill, founded PrepMD 8 years ago. We ourselves have backgrounds in the medical device industry. We've been senior officers of other medical device companies. We started our own careers in a clinical specialist type of role. When we started, these were purely sales roles, and the clinical specialist position had not fully evolved. So we, as sales representatives, did both clinical support as well as sales support in our function. But I would say in the mid-90s, because of the proliferation of devices, the complexity of devices, there became a differentiation of these roles. So sales representatives, even though they have and still have the capability to support clinical roles, are differentiated from individuals who we define as medical device clinical specialists, who are purely clinical and technical application support roles. So, but in our experience over the years that we've been doing this, I have over 40 years of experience. My partner Matt has over 35 years of experience. In that period of time, what we came to understand is these positions are critically important to the industry and to the companies and to the clinical medical system as well. So we struggled all of our management lives in finding really good people to do this work. So 8 years ago, we came upon the idea of starting a program that essentially would identify people who would be interested in this type career and then training them to do this kind of work so that companies and healthcare systems, when they had the need to hire these individuals, could come to us to recruit and ultimately employ these individuals. So the concept of PrepMD really emerged as a result of our own industry experience and our own sense of the value of these positions. In the 8 years that we have been operating our training and placement program, we've admitted over 350 people into the sessions that we run. And when we look at 90 days post-graduation, our placement rate is hovering above 94% into these roles, which in our sense is a endorsement of two things. First of all, ensuring that we have recruited the right talent pool into the program. And then secondly, we have taken that really robust talent pool and have trained them well such that they can perform the tasks that I described to you earlier. So who are ideal candidates for the PrepMD program? Maybe ideal is the wrong phrase, but the best candidates that we have seen coming to the program are those individuals who have a real commitment for this kind of career path. They oftentimes come from life science backgrounds, biomedical engineers, nurses, kinesiology majors, biology majors, chem majors, other types of engineers have come to our program and have done very well. But we've also found that the companies are looking for individuals who not only have solid life science backgrounds, but also business to business skills, because they want a platform of individuals who they can move through their ranks into sales roles, marketing roles, management roles, and so forth. And so they look for a wide variety of talent and skills in terms of the types of people that they hire. But regardless of whether you have a life science background or not, the most important component is to ensure that, or that we ensure that you are the type of person that can actually do this job and that you have the commitment to this career path. Because if you chose this type of career path, this is probably the professional work that you're going to do the rest of your professional career, or something very, very similar to this. You're going to be in the medical device industry, and you're going to be supporting either from a clinical and technical standpoint or from a marketing sales standpoint, you're going to be supporting the application and use of cardiac medical devices. So we want to make sure that the individuals who are coming to this program are truly committed to this career path. There are different ways to get into this career path. PrepMD is not the only way. Certainly not everyone who gets into the medical device industry has come through PrepMD. But what we have found, or what we find, is that PrepMD offers a very direct path to this career path, because hiring managers know about PrepMD. My partner and I have very good relationships with the companies that I described to you earlier. And as a result, we know their hiring managers, they know us, they understand the nature of the program that we offer here. They understand that we are going to use our best management skills to define the talent pool that we put into the program, that we have people who are really truly committed to this career path. And so they come here knowing that the talent pool here is the kind of talent pool that they want to address, in particular the job openings that they have. So the PrepMD program itself offers hiring managers that opportunity to ensure that they're not wasting their time, if you will, by ensuring that they're addressing the right kind of talent pool for these opportunities. So let me talk a little bit about the program itself. So the PrepMD program is 24 weeks in length, and that, as it turns out, is a length of time that we have tested over the 8 years that we've been performing this program. The PrepMD program, over the 8 years, we've discovered that 24 weeks is the right cycle length to ensure that we've got high quality, proper training, but also that we are getting our participants into their jobs as quickly as possible. So if you're going to spend the amount of money that is involved with our tuition, and in particular, the amount of time, 24 weeks of time out of your life, we want to ensure that we get you as quickly as possible from the start of the program into your job. And that's why we've constructed this program along the lines that we've constructed it. So we offer 3 programs a year. We offer a winter program, a spring program, and a fall program, each again 24 weeks in length. Each program starts with 8 weeks of distance learning. The core concepts that fuel the entirety of the program are embedded into this distance learning piece. It consists of taking online curriculum with fairly extensive testing. There are live webinars. There are live faculty hours that are conducted during that 8-week cycle. And it's inside of that 8-week cycle that individuals really measure themselves as to whether or not this is a good career path for them to embrace. We are, as I said, testing our participants extensively during that 8-week period. And the core concepts that we build into this program create the foundation so that upon the 9th week of the program, once you have successfully completed the distance learning piece, we can accelerate your training. Again, going back to why the program is 24 weeks in length, we can accelerate your training inside of the remainder of the program to ensure that you've got a really good, solid foundation such that hiring managers are going to be assured that you are going to be able to be very productive sooner than later once you are hired by them. So at the 9th week, the training cohort, whether it's a winter, spring, or fall training cohort, assembles here at our facility in Braintree, Massachusetts. We're roughly about 9 miles south of Boston, and we begin to conduct our training. So we have built out we have an 8,000 square foot facility. We've built out a replica of that procedure room that I referenced earlier. The EP, cardiac EP procedure room. We built out a replica of that here. We can actually reproduce the entirety of the implantation of a cardiac pacemaker, an implantable defibrillator, or an electrophysiology exam here at our facility. We have high-tech classrooms and other kinds of simulation rooms here. So from week 9, roughly through week 12, the entirety of the cohort is here on site taking that training. And then roughly at the 12th week or so, we take the cohort and we break them into 2 groups. One group will remain here for ongoing instruction for 1 week, and the other group will go out into Boston area hospitals. So we are contracted with some pretty major cardiac medical centers, the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, the Leahy Clinic, Boston University Medical Center, Tufts Medical Center. These are our clinical rotation sites, and that group of people will actually go into these hospitals, work right alongside of doctors and nurses that are applying real-time the device therapies to patients. So one group stays here for ongoing instruction for a week. The other group is out in clinical rotations in those hospitals for a week. And then the following week, these two groups switch. And this rotational experience continues from week 12 right through the end of the program. And I would say roughly at about the 16th, 17th week of the program, we start to open the cohort up to interviews with hiring managers. So hiring managers, again, because they understand that the program is existent and have needs, will come to us and say, they'll come here on site, they'll interview people on site, or we'll get a call from a hiring manager who says, do you have anybody interested in the Dallas area, or in Miami, or in Minneapolis, or Chicago, or Pittsburgh? And we will help the hiring manager to identify people who would be interested in those areas. They'll connect with the participants via some either a phone call or some internet video connection. And then based upon the conduct of that, that individual may be flown out to Dallas, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Minneapolis, Miami to interview with that hiring manager and his team or her team on a real-time basis. And so those interviews continue through the end of the program and beyond, actually. Right now, that we are placing somewhere between 38 to 43% of our students on or before graduation. And then the remainder of that placement continues right out through the 90-day cycle post-graduation, such that we're achieving about a 94% placement rate across the board, across all cohorts who have come to the program. So we're very good, I believe, at getting people into these jobs. So one of the requirements that we have for individuals coming to this program is, as I reflect back on my comment about the numbers of people doing this work, in particular in industry, it's really important that anyone considering this program be as geographically flexible as you possibly can be. One of the things that we state on our website is that you should really pick 3 regions of the country where you would consider yourself at ease doing this kind of work. We know that there are going to be jobs at the end of each training cycle. We just don't know and cannot predict where those jobs are going to be. And so if you're considering coming to this program, being geographically flexible is going to enhance the likelihood that you're going to get into one of these jobs as early as possible. And the more flexible you are, the more likelihood exists that you're going to get into this job as quickly as possible. Breaking down the curriculum itself and what we train on. So we're training on cardiac pacemakers, implantable cardiac defibrillators, and cardiac electrophysiology catheters. So this last category of product line we refer to as EP catheters or EP products is an enormously expanding area of interest in the device industry. So among the companies that I named earlier, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Abbott have very large cardiac EP product divisions, and they are joined by another company that I'm sure you've heard of, Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson has a division known as Biosense Webster. They are the market leader in EP catheters, and these companies also come to us to recruit and hire our participants for EP related careers. So what is EP? So an EP catheter is inserted into a patient's heart, and energy, some form of energy, is applied to the interior of the heart, the myocardium of the heart, and that energy is designed to create a lesion or some kind of disruption to the electrical energy of the heart that will prevent an arrhythmia. The most common use of EP catheters is to resolve an arrhythmia that you probably are hearing a lot about these days called atrial fibrillation. Many people suffer from atrial fibrillation. Many people suffer from it and don't know that they're suffering from it. And so a small fraction of our society are actually getting therapies that can resolve atrial fibrillation. And EP catheters, when successful, can deliver curative therapies to patients. And so our participants will be recruited by companies that supply these catheters, and that they also supply mapping systems that tell the physician exactly where in the heart the catheter should be located before that energy is applied to the heart. These mapping systems are supported by these medical device clinical specialists. So it's a very relatively new but rapidly evolving part of the industry, and our curriculum provides very solid foundational support for this type of career path. So we're placing more and more of our participants in these EP electrophysiology types of careers. So I think it's important to understand that and I mentioned it earlier briefly, that we are a tuition-based program. So the cost, the full cost of coming to the program is almost $32,000. So it's $30,000 of tuition, and then another $1,400 of fees, books, licenses, software, and so forth go into the tuition. And it's also important to know that we have a financial services company that helps to support students who are thinking about coming to this program. Their name is Meritize. Their information is on our website under admissions, under tuition, and they support and they can support people who are interested in coming to our program. They will, for qualified candidates, they'll provide loans up to $40,000 for an individual who comes to our program, because you have to consider that not only are you going to take this distance learning piece, but you're also going to be required to live here. If you're not from the area, you're going to be required to live here. And so you're going to have to support yourself financially while you're here. And we put the costs of doing that at roughly between $1,500 to $1,800 a month to support yourself for the roughly 4 months that you're here attending the on-site curriculum and involved in your clinical rotations. So what is the value then of spending this money and time and coming to the program? So what we know for sure, because we see and because we actively are involved in the placement of our students, we're not just simply training them, but we play a very active role with hiring managers and getting our participants aligned properly with the right geographies, the right company, the right fit, if you will. So we see offers coming through. So we have a really good sense of what these individuals are earning. And on average, when we look at both industry positions and clinical positions, on average, our participants are earning at minimum, entry level, about $82,000 to start. And that is to start. And of course, with time and expertise, the value of that position just increases. So from the standpoint of investment, we feel that it's a very good investment, financial investment, if indeed this is the type of career path that you want to engage. And that is, of course, an important question for each participant, each future participant. So when I just had a conversation with a former student here this morning. She's been with one of these companies now for 3 years. She just took her IBHRE, that certification exam that I mentioned earlier. So she is now CCDS qualified. And as it turns out in her life, she's married, or she is about to marry someone who was living out of the country, and she wants to go to Europe. And so I'm because of connections and so forth, I'm able to connect her with a hiring manager in Europe. And because of her CCDS certification that she's received, that connection may be facilitated. That's just one example of a former participant who is now channeling her career in a different fashion. We are constantly having notes and visits by prior attendees who have come to our program. What we see right now, importantly, I quoted the placement rate of hovering just a little above 94%. But what I think is even more significant is that when we look back over 3 years and saw the placements of individuals in jobs, over 83% of the individuals whom we have placed in jobs have stayed in those jobs over that 3-year cycle. So it really is, I think, an endorsement of the rewarding nature of the career, not only from a financial standpoint, which we think is very solid, but from a professional and personal standpoint. Finding a job today that provides you with a lifelong career path is a unique endeavor, and we've seen that over and over again in participants, in the over 350 participants who have come to our program. We've seen it over and over again. That said, this is not for everybody. This type of career is not for everybody. The hours are long. You could be out of the house at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you have to be in a hospital at 7 o'clock for the first procedure, and that day could extend. You could be home at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock that night, based upon the procedural caseloads and the things that you have to do. Excuse me. You could also be on call a weekend a month, where you would be limited in terms of what you'd be able to do on that weekend, because you're taking calls for the entire team that support these devices in your area. But again, if you've got the commitment to this career path, and you find that patient service and having a really high level of specialized expertise that no one else has, or no one else can have, or very few people have, is a remarkable opportunity, a remarkable career opportunity. And so that's the pathway that we afford through PrepMD, and I think that on that basis, there's not much more to talk about during our webinar. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have regarding the career path or the program. But once again, thank you very much for attending this webinar. I hope that the information that I've shared with you has been useful. And I want to let you know that as a follow-up to this webinar, we're going to be sending you some additional information about the career path and the program. But we are always open and available to take any questions that you may have. So I'll just pause here for a moment to see if anybody has any questions that I can answer on a real-time basis. So I have one question here, and apologize that I may have to put my glasses on to read it. Do we have to be online during a specific time? And so the 8 weeks of online is designed so that you can take it at your availability. The only mandates that we have during that period of time are live webinars. But even those are recorded. So if for whatever reason you miss one of the live webinars, it's recorded and you can go back and catch up on it. Those live webinars are really intended to take questions real time, but then we also have real time faculty hours. So you can reach out to faculty members on an as-needed basis to answer questions that you may have that have emerged while you're taking the online curriculum. So I hope that answered that question. If there are any other questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time. Okay, so it looks like we have no more questions at this juncture. I once again thank you all very much for participating in our webinar this morning, and we look forward to any future questions you may have about the career path and about the PrepMD program. Thank you again for taking the time out today to join us, and we look forward to connecting with you at some point in the future. Take care.